All right, we're at the top of the hour. Welcome. Welcome to the Valiantis webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about Atlassian governance practices. Before I begin, I just want to tell you a little bit about Valiantis. We are Atlassian's #1 top platinum partner, and we help our customers in the ecosystem with services, lots of training and licensing. And one of our core Valiantis values is to provide value at every interaction. And that's why we offer these webinars for free. We want to provide value to our customers and even to those who are not our customers. So after you hear about our governance practices in this webinar and why it matters to you, feel free to reach out to me by email or LinkedIn, and I can help you get started with your governance at your organization. We have various various ways that we can help you with that. We have classes, boot camps, or we even can do a governance engagement and get you started that way. And so, but let's go ahead and jump into the topic. So we're going to talk about implementing governance. And I typically go to the who, what, why, where kind of format. And that's what we really want to talk about is why do you care about governance? What is governance? And who's involved? How do you get started? And then I want to provide a demo. And so let's go ahead and jump into it. So governance, when people hear the word governance, you might think about the government, the federal, state, local governments in your country, in the United States. I'm here in Iowa. Because governance, it involves the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or a society. That's how Wikipedia defines it. It encompasses various aspects of decision making and control to ensure that the operations will run efficiently and in alignment with your goals. There are lots of different examples of governance. You'll see it in various areas, such as your development practices, your configuration management procedures. Companies will even use it for scope control with large customer engagements. I used to work on aircraft programs, and we'd bring in Bombardier or Boeing or Airbus or Mitsubishi to make decisions about what scope to include and what scope not to include with a change control board. IT, they historically have fantastic governance. It's one of the major values and operating models for an IT organization to make sure that their enterprise tools and their equipment and all of their servers and assets are running effectively. And the sign of success with a new deployment with IT often is that nobody really noticed. Everything was nice and quiet. And that's because they follow good governance practices to make sure that they're not impacting their users in a negative way. And so one of the things that comes up a lot is you're a governance expert, so bring her in on this this Microsoft product and have her give us governance practices on that. Well, governance is twofold. There's the understanding of how to facilitate and do your governance activities. What are the different change management, support, enablement, all of the different aspects that need to be included. But then there's the technical expertise with what you're trying to govern. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to say, I'm going to go join that governance board for that state election authority. It's not my specialty. I'm not going to be very effective at that. So we need to make sure that when we establish governance, we're thinking about both the process of governing an activity as well as the expertise about that specific tool or activity that you're trying to govern. And so that is an overview of governance. Why do we care about it? Well, when it comes to our Atlassian tools, we need governance if we want to be able to have a system that is worthy and able to be mined for all of the information in an appropriate manner. And that way you can actually track your development life cycle from start to finish, and that you can actually capture the metrics for flow, for value, and to get that visibility for dependencies and risks and for scope and releases, all of the things that executives and the team members and everybody in between, everything that they care about, you want to have a good data map and understanding of how that data interacts. So that's really what you're looking for. Why you care about this is so that you can have that operational visibility and collaboration, and you can have that knowledge base enabling your guidance and your standards. What we often see, we have something called our Jira Hall of Fame. The consultants will add to it now and then when they see something that's kind of strange or out there. And on the right there, you can see this crazy workflow, and that's just an example of some of the workflows that we might see in a Jira system sometimes. Or maybe you've seen where you have hundreds or thousands of issue types or custom fields or workflows, statuses and schemes. If you have more than a handful or a dozen Jira admins, then you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so that can also lead to that kind of what we affectionately call the wild, wild west. Some people call it Franken Jira. But those are indications that you have a need for some governance over your Atlassian tools. These are just some of the other questions that you might ask. Do most of the projects have their own issue type scheme and workflow scheme, or are they using shared schemes? That's often an indication that you're having lots of different systems going off in different directions, or several dozen issue types. If you have multiple versions of the done status, I remember seeing a presentation at the Atlassian Teams event. Back then it was called the Atlassian Summit. And a company was talking about how they had 600 different versions of done in this system. Done, complete, canceled. They had canceled with one L, they had canceled with two L's. I saw recently one that had canceled with one L, canceled with two L, and then also canceled / killed. So there's so many different ways you can describe the work that's been done or canceled. But if you have dozens of statuses in your indicating that work is done, then that's probably an indication that you have some wild, wild west. And it makes it very hard for people to create a filter and a dashboard or to intersect with other tools, automations, because they don't know exactly which field or which status they're going to need to look at. And so those are some of the examples that, and if the answer to any of those questions is true for your organization, then it's very possible that the Atlassian tools started out in engineering. Like I said, IT historically has really good governance because of the long-lived IT organizations have established that type of governance over all of their tools. But typically what happens with Jira is it's an engineering grassroots adoption. Engineering starts using this tool and it's working really great. And eventually they're tired of managing it and they throw it over the wall to IT. And then IT has to try and figure out how to clean up this mess. Or you might have a reorg or acquisitions that are causing lots of different systems to be pulled together. And all of them, even if they had good governance, all are operating in different manners. And so you have to marry them up and get those. They might have, say, a field called product in one, and another one that's product line, and another one that's component. And maybe they all actually mean pretty much the same thing in terms of that organization, but they're going to have to merge those in some way. So they're going to need to establish a unified governance. We see that a lot with our engagements. And so if you need help with that, reach out to us. Some of the things that are going to be involved in this are, you need to address that wild, wild west configuration. Permissions and security issues. Those are things that you might have to attack right away. We want to make sure that our permission schemes and that our administration access is appropriate for our organization and for the visibility of the data. Otherwise, you could end up with some security issues, especially if you're in an organization that has perhaps some federal requirements for visibility of data. End user confusion. That is a big deal. And I'm seeing that right now with one of my clients where they have a field that's replicated in 6 different names and types, or the same name as 6 different places, though, 6 different configurations, some in team managed projects, some in company managed projects. So when they're trying to build they're actually using tempo structure to build out their data reporting system. And when they pull that in, they don't know which field to select. So is it this one? Nope. Is it this one? Nope. Oh, it's the third one. So they have to remember, it's always the third one in the list. That's crazy. That end user confusion is a big deal, and it wastes time. So we need to address that. End user support. One of the things that a good governance board will look at is, how do we support our end users? What are our enablement practices? What are our practices for how we manage changes, and how we communicate that? And where is the knowledge base so that we can help provide answers before they even have to reach out to us? Admin training and system cleanup. Some of the organizations that we work with, the admins may be very inexperienced, or you have some that are experienced and some that are not, and they all have different understandings of best practices. So you might want to pull them into some classes so they can level set on that. Atlassian offers a lot of classes and courseware. Much of it is free now. Valiantis, we actually have boot camps for Jira and Confluence, where we actually not only teach you what you can do, but what should you do, including some guidance in terms of what are the best practices and how to establish governance. And then after you've got your system in shape, you're also going to want to extend it. You might want to extend it for automations and for your CI/CD pipeline, or quite frequently, you want to have good project management or PPM solutions and agile support. Or if you're following a scaled agile methodology like SAFe or large scale Scrum or disciplined agile, you're going to need to have the right tools in place to be able to show your program boards and to understand all of the scope that's being planned. And so those are some of the considerations that a tools governance board is going to have oversight for, and that they're going to want to be putting into their backlog as they work through that. And so how do they get started? Well, it's really who gets started. And you want to stand up that Atlassian Tools Governance Board. It might be called the ALM Change Control Board. That's what we called it when I was at my company before I became a consultant. Or maybe a recent one I've heard is the Jira Harmony Council, which I thought was pretty cool. Whatever you call your Atlassian Tools Governance Board, you want to make sure that you have a good representation from the end users and from the admins. And you're also going to want to have a product owner, or whatever their role is. It's the person that's going to have that final decision-making authority to say, okay, we're having trouble coming to consensus, so we have to make a decision, and this is the decision going forward. But otherwise, for the most part, you're going to try and get this whole governance board to come to a consensus of, maybe this wasn't my number one option, but I can support it, and I will support it. I can live with it and I will support it. So that is really the definition of consensus with this governance board. We want to make sure that they can understand how it's operating, and they can live with the decisions that are made, and they can support them. And so you're going to want those engaged representatives. Sometimes getting a rotation of engaged representatives might work. So maybe when you establish your governance board at start, you'll have 6 people from engineering and project management, quality control. But then they might, they start losing interest. They got the changes in that they really care about, and they've got other responsibilities. So you might want to rotate those people and have it, because your governance practices is long-lived, to maintain that system. But in the beginning, what they're going to really start out on is understanding, what is our vision? What are our goals? How do we operate? What is our scope of responsibility? Which tools do we have responsibility for? Which support models do we have responsible for? And then you're going to want to identify what is our Jira baseline supposed to look like? We know we got this wild, wild west system, but what do we really want it to look like? And they're going to make those decisions about their Jira architecture, their project and data topology, what fields and workflows and issue types they want to support. And then they're going to implement it and then start moving projects over into that and creating new projects in that. So that way the Wild Wild West starts becoming unused, and then you can start cleaning up those unused fields, unused statuses, and getting them out of the system. So after they baseline that, they're going to meet monthly to review change requests or maintenance or user support. If they're using data center, they're going to also be discussing upgrades and when those happen and what those impacts will be. When they do get those change requests, some of the things that the governance board needs to think about is what are all the different aspects of this change. I often hear people say, oh, well, they're requesting this plugin and it's free, so it's no big deal, right? So let's give it a try. There is no such thing as a free plugin. No, there's no such thing as a free plugin because every plugin will have something that it's inserting into your system. It might be configuration elements, like your maybe it's inserting some fields or some link types or an issue type. Maybe it's introducing different workflow requirements. But once that you try that out and decide, no, that's not the plugin we wanted, and you pull it out, all of those configuration elements are still in your system and you have to clean them up, or they're just going to impact things. And so there's no such thing as a free plugin. The other thing that plugins will do is that when you put a new plugin out there, you have to support it. Your end users might start using it and they're going to have questions for it, or they're going to have problems using it and they're going to need enablement. And so there's a cost in that way as well. So keep that in mind. There is no such thing as a free plugin, and make those proper decisions when you're considering, why is this being requested? What is the real need? Not the solution. Let's find out what the need is. What is it they're trying to address? Then you can start looking at the options for how to solution it. And so when you're wanting to get started, two of the key activities is, what is our governance vision and what is our governance purpose? We have two here. Ensure an ongoing balance between enterprise goals and enterprise growth via flexible controls managed by the employees who best understand the purpose and value of those products across the organization. So you want those end users really involved, and they're helping to define it. So then the governance purpose, this is the governance body who will support the creation, discussion, decision, and implementation of the Atlassian products, apps, components, and configuration. And so that's where you will define for your company, what are we really trying to accomplish here? What is our vision and purpose? You want your vision to emphasize that importance of maintaining balance, because our goal isn't to dictate to everybody, you must operate in this way. Our goal is system thinking to optimize for the whole organization. And you want to have that balance between the organization's goals and its growth and between the end users who are using the system. So when we look at what our governance goals and components are, here's a nice slide that shows our goals are in the center. And our goals are that we want to have scalable growth, visible control, the end users own it, and we have knowledge sharing. So scalable growth, what kind of frameworks are we implementing that are going to allow us to continue to grow? As you expand the footprint of your tools across your enterprise, it should be easier and more efficient every time you do it, because you've built a process that's scalable. And visible controls are needed to keep your rocket from crashing. If you think of your organization as a rocket, you don't want it crashing. But the controls need to be visible. How visible is the control mechanism that your organization has? Everyone that touches the tools should be able to see how the governance operates, what options they are considering, what decisions are they making. And so we combine this with visible control. And we want to make sure that all of the governance board activities are fully transparent to all of the end users. That user ownership goes back to the idea of representation. Everybody that is in the tools themselves should not only be able to see things, but they should know how they can influence things. And individuals who are the power users, as we often refer to them, the subject matter experts in the tools, maybe they're the prima donna about, we need it this way. Those are the people that you want to have involved in the governance process so that they can see how it impacts everyone and they can provide meaningful information about what they know. And then knowledge sharing. How do we promote these ideas across the entire company? We want to have effective trainings and change management across the organization. And the larger the company, the more challenging that becomes. So having change management across the entire organization and having that robust knowledge base and involvement with the communities of practice will be critical to supporting this goal. Then there's the components, and the components that are essentially the scope of the governance board. They represent all of the different activities that they're responsible for, the tools and the activities. And so across the top, we have the products with Confluence and Jira, and your source control tools and your portfolio. And then the lower half are the activities around governance, your support models and your knowledge base. A good, healthy governance structure will identify the scope of the governance board to include the appropriate products and the appropriate activities. And so these architectural decisions, they can significantly impact how your organization uses Atlassian products. And these are some of the things that your governance board is going to start out right away, just trying to decide. What are our layers of scale? What's the hierarchy of our data in our system? What's our scope of responsibility? What portions of support and change management are we responsible for? What tools are we responsible for? What's our Jira configuration structure? How do we lay our data into that data topology? And how do we define a Jira project? Are our Jira projects defined around teams, around programs, around products, or do we have a mix and match of all kinds of different types of Jira projects? If the latter, then maybe that's a place where you want to start. You're also going to be thinking about what are our program and portfolio requirements. And you're going to be thinking about those different team level customizations and the integrations. We want to balance our best practices of KISS, keep it simple, silly, with the value added reporting or dependency management at all levels based on the organizational architecture. So what I'm showing you here, I'm going to go ahead and get into a demo here. And this is our Atlassian Governance Board Confluence space in our demo environment. And this is really something that I think is a great model. You can put your governance board documentation and all of this structure in Confluence. You can put it in SharePoint. This can all be in a single Confluence space, or it can be in multiple Confluence spaces. How you organize this is really up to you. But what I want to stress is that you are covering all of this material some way, somehow, that it's visible to all of your end users, fully transparent, and that it's not scattered to the wind, which is what we see quite often. These things are scattered. Oh yeah, we've got this run book. Where is it? Oh, it's in John's personal space. Or yeah, we've got that knowledge base article. Where is it? Oh, it was in my bookmarks list. It's actually in a different system. So make sure that all of this is captured in a central location, even if it's just through linking. But let me show you the elements of this governance board. So here's our Atlassian governance space. And it's broken down into these sections of where I have the governance practices, Atlassian administration, and the knowledge base. And each of these sections are important in their own way, and I'll get into those. But on the home page, I have the information that we talked about before. Our mission and purpose statements are are here, as well as our operating model, how often we meet, and our processes on how we meet, as well as the membership of who are the people that are the admins, who are the people that are on the governance board itself. What are the different groups that we have? What is the scope of our tools and scope of our governance? And it's nice to have links for your production environment as well as your sandbox environments and status on whether they're active or not. So this is a nice landing page for your governance board. Then we go into our governance practices, Atlassian administration, and knowledge base. These are broken down in different ways. And so we have our best practices and guidance on how all of the different best practices associated with configuration of your system, including your Jira admins and how many you would recommend. A good number is typically 1 for every 300 to 500 users, for example. Avoiding the Atlassian project templates, or how you label new database elements, status names, naming conventions, all kinds of different guidance. This has been built up over the years, probably the combined wisdom of 10 or so different consultants with combined experience of 50 years in Atlassian tools. But then the rest of our section here, we have, for example, our change request process. How does somebody ask for a change? And our support model, and our enablement model, and our communications plans. All of those are things that you're going to want to capture. How do we do these things? And then we have our decision log. And this decision log is really nice in that it captures all of the decisions that we're making for our architecture, for our product access groups, for our permission schemes, workflows, global configuration, link types, resolutions, all of the different things that go into defining your Jira system. For example, our Jira architecture, this is where we would want to try and decide what layers of scale do we want to account for, and how many different layers and why. And so you might have your governance board start discussing what are the options. Do we want 4 layers of scale, or 5, or 3? And they'll start capturing what are the pros and cons associated with that, make some decisions, and capture that information fully transparent to everybody for why that decision was made. Another one is the project structure. I normally tie this to the project category field. When you set up a project, it's got a project category field that makes it easy for an admin to audit. All of the projects in this category should be using these shared schemes, and all the projects in this other category should be using these shared schemes. And so that's a great use of the project category field, but it doesn't have to be that field. You could just be calling them your project types. But when you create those, then you're going to create those template projects, and you're going to decide what are the different types that you want to use. An example of some of the options that could be considered, you're looking at your hierarchy, and perhaps your organization settled on having 5 layers of hierarchy for issue types. Well, then they have some options. Do they want to have all 5 layers in a single Jira project? Or do they want to break out the portfolio and higher level work into a enterprise style project, and then have the Jira epics and the level 0 stories, tasks, bugs, and all of those types of issue types in a separate project category, maybe calling it the program project category. Or we've even seen places where they have the enterprise project category for the higher level work, intermediate for the program with epics, and then each team having their own. There are other options as well. I've seen some options where they're organizing around products, or where we're organizing where we have the capabilities are embedded with the teams, or you have multiple team projects that are some that are hardware and some that are software and some that are business teams, so that they can have their unique issue types and workflows, but the epics are embedded with those teams and assigned to them that way. And so we will, when we're working with a client, we'll work through these pages, customize them as appropriate for the type of scope that that organization works with. And then they'll discuss those options. and maybe throw out some other options as well. Look at the pros and cons, the benefits, and how Jira operates in there, and then make your decisions. And so as you work through these, you'll decide what are our project category structure, what are our Jira workflow starting and ending practices. For example, I'm a big proponent of having a single starting status and having a dual ending status, and then everything in between is up for grabs. That makes it very nice when you're integrating with any of the tools, that you can always see what is being actually completed versus what's been canceled, and then you don't have to have a dozen or so different ending statuses. Release status, for example, could be a custom field, or you could have it in release, in progress, where you're identifying the different types of release. Maybe it's a go live or beta release or limited access release. And then after you're through all of the release process, then it would move into the complete state. And so those workflow starting and ending practices are something that will help project management and your PMO office understand where the work is and how to know when something truly is done or has been thrown out and withdrawn. So other items that you'll be looking at, permission schemes, priority schemes, notification schemes, all of these different configuration items, all of those decisions will be captured by the decision log for the governance practices. Then we get down to our Atlassian administration area. And so there's where you're going to have naming conventions, because it's really important to understand why certain configurations exist. Which naming conventions are these associated with for issue type schemes and for workflow schemes? Having them defined, what is our naming convention, rather than having things be ad hoc names, which are often very hard for people when they go into the system 2 years later and try to figure out, well, what was this one used for and why? They're going to have their common run books for common activities. Maybe they need to build out certain run books because their support team is going to be using them on a regular basis. So those run books might include decision points of, do I need to get the governance board's approval for this type of change, or is this something that I can go forward with right away? They're going to have their maintenance activities, all of the different things that they have to consider, such as their regular sandbox updates or the yearly housekeeping activities they have, which quite often certain plugins or applications like Jira Align, there is certain housekeeping that has to be considered. Things, how to grant access, or all of the different maintenance activities that the administration group is responsible for will be captured there. Finally, there's the knowledge base. And this knowledge base is not intended to recreate all of the great Atlassian documentation. Or, Tempo, they create all kinds of great videos and documentation about their tools. Or any of your other plugins that you might purchase, they will have knowledge bases and YouTube channels that will explain a lot of how their tools operate. What you really want to have here is stuff about your Jira configuration, such as what are the different project categories and how do we define these project categories. For example, our enterprise project template, you can find it in our sandbox here and here, and this is how it's defined with these issue type schemes, this workflow scheme, and the different other schemes that are associated with it. And you'll have those identified specifically, so that way end users will know whatever details they need to know without having to have Jira admin access to see it. So that way, when they go to request a project, they can know what are the options and which one's most appropriate for mine. Here we've defined the enterprise project template is a Jira project template defined for portfolio and enterprise leadership to track enterprise themes and portfolio initiatives. So they can identify immediately, is this the type of project I need? No. We need something for our program. Wait, this is not for a portfolio. So then they would go look elsewhere, perhaps the program project category. So that's the configuration section, but then you would also provide links. What are your favorites for your Atlassian documentation videos or for the Atlassian documentation about searching? And you'll have those all captured so that way it's easy access, but you don't want to maintain all that stuff in your system. Providing links to Atlassian is much better. Let Atlassian pay for all that maintenance. However, you will have a Jira best practices section or a Confluence's best practices section where you're going to put your company specific decisions of how we use the system. Perhaps you have, for our systems, we always want to use this type of sprint naming convention, or this is how we want to set up our advanced roadmaps to show the types of information that we like to see at our executive reviews, or this is how we use structure to provide the types of automation and calculations that we want to see. And so that's where you're going to put your best practices and Confluence best practices specific to your organization. So labels taxonomy is a great one for your Confluence. As everybody knows, labels can get quite out of control. So having some idea as to these are the labels we prefer to use at our company will really help with that as well. Or we built out certain Confluence page templates for how we do engineering estimates, for how we do our critical design review, or whatever it is that's company specific, and we've created our Confluence page templates. You can document those here, so that way people know they're available to them. And so that's how I would set up a Atlassian governance board space. But like I said, these don't have to be in Confluence. They could be in SharePoint, and they don't necessarily have to all be in the same space. You might have them in separate spaces. But this is truly what is needed to have a healthy system that's being managed appropriately. To sum up, one of the things I would like to say is that Valiantis has some core values. One of them, though, that's really stands out is to provide value at every interaction. And so we are really always trying to commit to providing that value. I hope that you found this overview of governance helpful. When we provide value in a webinar, that's great. I love working with my clients in training or in engagements because we have a style of contract called the level of effort contract, where we can go off in different directions based on whatever priorities are set for your company, and those priorities often evolve. And so we might be talking about agile practices one week, and then the next week we might be talking about Jira project hierarchy or architecture. And so it's always interesting and always valuable. That's what our one of our key values is. And so for governance specifically, we have the 1 hour webinar. We do this every couple of months. We have several more webinars where we haven't had these technical difficulties. So if you want to watch a different one, feel free to jump in there. There's also some from last year with Steve Terrelmas. So if you want to get a different flavor of governance, there's other authors as well. We have a governance workshop or boot camp is sometimes what we call these. It's a one-day hands-on where we will actually walk you through with your governance board how to establish your governance and how to facilitate through those decision-making activities. Or we can actually, like I said, provide an engagement, and those are typically anywhere from 2 to 4 months, where we will help you set up your governance board, start marching through your decisions, and help you through the process of building out that Jira architecture in your system. We also have this idea of the Valiantis maturity curve. And what we show here is, you might be in the place where we really are just going through our migrations and we're consolidating a bunch of systems, or we might be training up some of our admins. But you might be looking further in where you're actually looking at business agility and custom solutions and analytics. And so there's lots of different activities that you can go through on your Atlassian journey. To support that, what we have is value as a service. Values as a service is a strategic type of IT consulting that we provide, where we actually have somebody who's working with your leadership and with your implementation teams to understand what does the company really need as a whole to get where they want to go in 5 years. And we might be looking at any of these types of activities of consolidations or agile methodologies and training, or analytics, managed services, your enterprise service management, or custom solutions. And we have all experts in all of these areas. And so the nice thing about a value as a service type contract is, depending on what the topic is, we can then pull in team members to support that activity for those months when we're working on that. And then when we want to move on to a different activity, we'll pull in other team members for their expertise as well. So, are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Feel free to put those in the chat. We also have upcoming webinars and classes, and I'll ask my colleagues to put those links into the chat, where we have our training and events calendar and our Valiantis YouTube channel. Like I said, you can watch all kinds of different videos out there that will provide value to you for free. One of the questions I often get asked is, what's the biggest challenge I see when it comes? And really, it boils down to, do we have the authority to make the decisions that we need to make? The support from our leadership to make the tough decisions sometimes, to find a common standardization that everybody will be able to support, and the longevity. We need to understand that governance is not something that we do and then we're done. Governance is something that happens over time and will evolve and continue to evolve the entire life of the system, from initiation all the way to the point of retirement. And so establishing governance on your systems is not a one-time event. Hope you found some value in our discussions today. Thank you so much for attending.